All right, everybody, thank you for tuning in. I'd really love to talk to you about a few things today because I have been observing certain tendencies happening in the teaching industry recently that I'd really love to talk to you about. It just so happened that in my history as an English teacher, I've been quite good at predicting tendencies and at predicting trends that would later play out in reality. So I thought that based on my observations today, if you're in the teaching industry, there might be a few things that you might actually take out from our interaction today that I'd really love to talk to you about. I notice that right now, as people are staying at home for quite a long time, many people are opting into the teaching industry, and I notice that it's very, very valuable when you can actually start becoming a teacher, start your career or do your teaching whatever level you're at. If you're 100% sure that the information that you're getting is straightforward, it's relevant, it's up to date, and it has value to you specifically. So if you want to be in the front line, if you want to be in the avant-garde, there are a few things I'd love to share with you today. I hope you can hear me well, so if you can, and if the video is clear, please just post a little yes into the chat and say hello. If you don't know who I am, let me introduce myself very briefly. My name is Lilia and I work as an English teacher and a therapist. I do healing and I help people heal. So I catalyze the processes that they already have inside of them. And I'm very happy to facilitate this movement of consciousness expansion in the universe just as much as I can. So let's just jump into it. I'm going to take you through the major tendencies that I can observe in the world these days that have to do with teaching English as a foreign language. If you have questions, feel free to post them into the chat. I'll be very happy to interact with you and to respond to your comments and to your experiences and to your questions, if that is something that you think is appropriate for us to do. As you can probably tell if you have been attending teaching conferences recently, is that the industry is getting enriched. We have many new approaches in the teaching industry these days. We have integrated learning, we have multiple intelligences, we have whole body response, we have other things like we have integrated things, right? So we have CLIL, which is fun. We have many of those subjects that were previously taught in native languages. They're now being transferred into English, and that is very cool. Hi Rachid, I'm so happy to have you here, and hi Sardar, thank you very much for joining. I'm very happy to see you guys here. The major thing, if I were to take a broader view of what is happening in the teaching industry, is integration. And integration is an overall theme towards which we're being pushed as humanity on our way to growth and development. Integration is something that is taking place in the teaching field. We started talking about critical thinking many years ago. I think about a decade ago, we started introducing critical thinking activities into our classroom, and the progress was really amazing because critical thinking is such an important life skill that we started teaching in English, so people benefited just by leaps and bounds by doing that. But now I feel that we're getting a little bit stuck in critical thinking only, and if we want to be successful on the teaching path, and if we want to teach quality English, we need to add other different types of intelligences to critical thinking. We need to start teaching emotional intelligence and emotional validation. We need to start teaching observation and mindfulness and somatic intelligence, understanding what is going on with a person's body, what is going on in their internal perceptive field, what is happening on the external. So we're heading for a very integral experience if we want to make our English lessons enriching. And currently, this is something that I'm doing with my students who I work with one-on-one. We try to integrate as many spheres of human intelligence into our lessons as we can. For instance, to every teacher who is starting out on their teaching path these days, I would really recommend tapping into emotional intelligence and realizing that we work with human beings who are primarily emotional. With this whole boom in critical thinking, many people are grasping the idea that rationality and logic is something that is in the basis of a human mind. But in fact, it's the emotions that govern our experience. It's our emotions that make us who we are, and actually through the emotions we get most of our life experience, and we interact with the world through emotions. So understanding our emotions is of critical importance these days. So there are certain activities that can be done in a classroom to promote emotional intelligence. They include emotional validation, perspective travel, getting into another person's shoes. For instance, when you're showing a class an image of a few people, everyone doing their own thing, and you're asking your student to step into one of those people's perspectives and seeing what the world is like from that person's perspective. That is so great. I mean, it trains people in looking at the world from different perspectives. We're living in a reality that is multi-perspectival. Reality is nothing but a perspective, right? So it's really crucial that we actually take that into consideration and teach our learners through the English language to understand their emotions and other people's emotions. So the first step on that integrative path is to add emotional thinking and emotional intelligence to critical thinking and critical thinking intelligence. That would be really important. Because we're heading for this integral approach, and the major theme in the teaching field these days is integration, we need to make sure that we add other aspects of life to our English lessons, focusing on the social domain and understanding relationships and interactions that actually happen between real human beings, not between Bob and Ben from a course book, but between real human beings. And principles that govern those interactions are really, really crucial, right? We need to understand how interactions happen. I was really shocked when I started reflecting on my school experience, because one thing that I noticed that struck me as abysmal was that we were taught a multitude of things, a plenitude of things. We were taught calculus when we were in high school. We were taught biology and how cells work and how blood vessels work and everything. But we were never taught how interactions work, how relationships work, how men and women are different, how understanding can be reached. And I think that it is the teacher's job to facilitate interactions, to teach language for interactions that are effective, to teach English for interactions that honour listening, genuine listening, that honour genuine experience transmission to another person. And that is something that we need to take responsibility for as English teachers. That is something that we can actually integrate within our lessons. And there are techniques that I'm not going to go into here because we're just scratching the surface, but that is something that can be learned and can be taught. And if you're new to my line of work, I highly recommend that you take a look at the things that I have already put out and see how I integrate all of those things into speaking lessons. So we've talked about emotional intelligence. Thank you, Amit, for taking notes for me. And we've talked about complementing critical thinking with emotional intelligence. We've talked about the importance of teaching genuine conversation and experiential listening, and how we can teach language in a way that promotes fulfilling relationships, because the social domain is very much about language, isn't it? And that is something that we as teachers are also heading for. So why not do that? Why not do that? I think that learning what principles of effective interaction are is really helpful to facilitating language development for our learners. If we have no idea how to have a genuine relationship with a person, if we have no idea how to express ourselves authentically, how to be genuine in our interaction, we cannot teach it. So we need to figure that out by ourselves first. We need to figure that out by ourselves. The second theme that I really want to touch upon, that I feel is getting a big theme in the world these days, is where we get the knowledge. And that is something that we're going to take into consideration in our English lessons as well. There is a whole field of studies called epistemology, how we know what we know. And I intuit that in the world of getting knowledge and of learning in education, there will soon be happening a shift from reliance on authority, from reliance on experts and dependability on experts, to reliance on yourself and on your direct experience. In this world these days, we are taught primarily to depend on experts and to rely on third-party knowledge. Everything we know we get from either a textbook or by word of mouth, another person telling us something, be it a teacher or a parent or a primary caregiver. And that's how we learn. And because nobody teaches us to look for the direct experience, to look for the answers by ourselves, in ourselves, we don't know how to do that. And we trust the third party, you see, we trust the expert. And we feel very broken. It comes as part of the territory. We feel inadequate and incapable of solving life problems because nobody teaches us to look inward, to look for those problems. Even in spirituality, even with all those gurus, we listen to the gurus. We go to YouTube and we follow experts. And we listen to those experts in a hope that the experts will tell us how to live lives. And because we give our responsibility outward to those gurus and experts and teachers, we grow very inadequate inside. We feel that we have no internal capacity to manage life and to navigate life. It's a double-edged sword, really. If we delegate our responsibility outward, we have no responsibility inward, right, by definition. And that is a shift that is bound to happen if we want to live happy and fulfilling lives. We're discovering that listening to experts and relying solely on external authority is limited in the sense that it's not fulfilling and we don't grow up. The definition of an adult is someone who can rely on their ability to find the answers by themselves, by himself or herself. And that is an ability that we're going to teach to our learners as teachers. We're going to teach that by internal observation, by mindfulness, by introspection, by listening to their bodies, by listening to their emotions, by listening to what their mind is doing, by investigating the workings of their own mind. That will have to be done in an honest, introspective fashion, and that is something that we can teach via language. So that is another shift that I'm observing in the industry, and that is something that we will have to teach to the learners. Just to recap on what I just said, the shift will be happening from listening to the external authority and trusting fully to the external authority to learning to trust your direct experience, getting the direct experience and trusting yourself, turning yourself into an authority. And as teachers, we're going to teach the learners to trust themselves as that authority. And this can't be done if we carry on teaching people to memorize quotes of what someone else has said. If we teach our learners to trust what someone else has said prior to what they think and what they feel and how they feel is right, we're setting them up for this helplessness that we ourselves suffer from as adults. Can't you see how you suffer from this as an adult? Every time we have a problem, the last person we're going to trust in being able to solve that problem is ourselves. We'd rather go and seek an expert. Very rarely do we actually sit down and question that reality of whatever we're going through. And that is something that has to shift about education. If we want to change education, if we want to change education for real, we need to create that shift from teaching people to memorize what someone else has said to grasping what is true for themselves. If that is not done, then this whole reliance on experts will proliferate and it will flourish and it will carry suffering with it, you see. That is something that will keep happening. Too much memorization in education has its detrimental effects. And the most crucial aftermath effect of that is that people feel very helpless. People leave school, people graduate feeling they have no sense of purpose because no one has ever taught them to question their own sense of purpose, their own sense of rightness, their own sense of being them, himself or herself. But that is something that needs to be started to be taught in state institutions everywhere. If we don't start directing our learners' attention inward to what is true for them, to what they think, to how they feel, not how Bob feels, not how Ben feels in a course book, we will set them up for failure. So that is something that needs to be taken into account. The activities that are going to come out in most course books these days are going to shift towards more and more meaningful, more and more relevant to everyday life experiences. So this focus on meaningfulness is going to become prominent. It's becoming more and more prominent these days. And what can be more meaningful than a person's own life, than their own understanding of reality? If we don't help our learners create the trust in their ability to discover what is true about reality, by definition, we'll be giving them away to authority, to listening to the third-party sources and never trusting themselves. And if they don't have that clear sense of purpose, they will keep doing the jobs that they hate. They'll keep doing the things that they hate, you see? You see how that works? If I don't have a clear sense of purpose, I will do the things that I hate. Or I will do the things that are not mine, right? That I was not cut out to do. Maybe I will land in an area of life that I like, if I'm lucky. But it's more likely that I will end up in an area of life that my parents told me was lucrative, or where my peer pressure has brought me towards. Listening to yourself is something that we need to work on these days. Listening to yourself and trusting yourself, developing introspection. And that is something that can be done. And the third field that I think will be very important for teachers to master in the future is developmental psychology. We need to start understanding that human beings develop in stages. And these stages are predictable. Human development happens in stages. And these stages have been described by a field of psychology called developmental psychology. So when we're working with a teenager, we need to recognize that a teenager has very different values than an adult person who is in their 30s, perhaps. We need to realize and recognize and understand that if we're working with a 10-year-old student, they have their own view of reality. They have their own picture of life, their own understanding of life. And as teachers, we need to be able to recognize that. And if we're working with an adult, we need to be able to define which stage of development that person is at. And depending on their values, if we're aware of the whole model of human growth and development, and if we're aware of human potential, what is possible for humans, we can actually guide that person towards growth and towards higher development and reaching greater depth of human potential. Here are some of my favorite developmental psychology studies and researchers. Ken Wilber. Check out Ken Wilber's work. He's a fantastic psychologist who works in the sphere of developmental psychology. He studies how people develop, and you can, by actually looking into his integral theory of human development, you can actually figure out what the next stage of your development is. And you can actually figure out what steps you can take toward that stage. Susan Cook-Reuter, another incredible researcher who talks about developmental psychology. She talks about the human ego and how we develop through life. And that is like a map that we can use in life. I'm very excited about that because I think that it gives our life a little bit of structure. And we really long for having structure in life. We really long for having that framework. We try to get the meaning out of life. That is something that we really want to get out of life. We want to construct meaning, right? The human mind is such that it constructs meaning. It may construct meaning in a very pathological fashion. If you're not aware of how your mind constructs meaning, you may end up running in circles or having a life that is unfulfilling. But if you're aware of how your mind constructs meaning, and you're also aware of how your mind grows, you can become strategic about your own growth, and you can pass this on to your learners. It's also very easy. Every time I meet a new student, because I'm aware of developmental psychology and I know how human mind operates, I feel that I can get a better idea of what I need to teach to this person and how I need to teach that to them, to him or to her. And I have that understanding, and so I do that. As opposed to situations when I'm just trying to hope that I'm teaching the right thing. No, I get very deliberate and strategic about it. And if you're working in teaching or in counselling, figuring out developmental psychology as a field and learning about those models of human development is a thing of utmost importance. So just to recap on what we have discussed so far, we talked about the major themes of development for teachers and the themes that are going to run like a red thread in the future. Integration, integrating many aspects into teaching, being open-minded and learning about different domains and aspects of life, the social domain, cognitive intelligence or critical thinking, emotional intelligence, activities that are drawn from all of those different fields have to be introduced into our classrooms. That is something that is going to happen with major publishers such as National Geographic Publishing and also some other publishing houses. This is already happening. This is already a theme. Secondly, epistemology, how we get the knowledge. We will have to teach our learners, and we will keep doing so because more and more people are doing that. We're going to teach our learners to rely on their own experience of life and on their own ability to seek answers for life based on their direct experience, as opposed to memorizing and learning some preset information from a course book done by a professor or an academic. So there's going to be a shift from relying on the third party when it comes to learning and getting knowledge, 2, relying on ourselves and introspection. And the third area is developmental psychology, how human mind develops and how to integrate that into our classrooms, and how to interact with the learner based on the understanding of the level of development that they're currently at. Okay, so that was my little overview. You're free to ask your questions. I'll be very happy to interact with you and to actually see what you have to say about the material that I have shared with you today, about my predictions. I'll be very happy to respond to your questions, and I can see a few questions being there, so let's just see. Sardar has a question. Dear teacher, I have a problem. I study English for a while seriously and leave it for a while. After a month I return for the second time to my English studies, and what is the appropriate treatment? Just try doing a little bit of English every day, Sardar. Make sure English is not a hat that you put on when you're working on a unit, but rather part of your life, part of your routine. I think a mistake that many people make is that they treat English as a subject that is there to be studied. Many people treat English as something detached from their real life experience. Therefore, when they sit down to learn English, that's their English hours. And the attitude that learners take towards English is just that, just like a subject, just like physics, learning some vocabulary list or anything. But it shouldn't be like that, you see. English can be a part of your life. It should be a part of your life. Don't treat it as a subject. Mold that hat into your skin. Make sure that English is part of your life experience. Do things in English that truly interest you. Don't force yourself to learn about environmental issues if you have no interest in doing so. Go to YouTube and watch some videos about things that you truly like. Listen to songs. Comment in English. Write comments in English. Read through comment sections under your favorite videos in English. See where that takes you. See if you enjoy that. If you don't, try something else. You see, everything in life is connected with language. Language is our main domain for communication. So the things that could be done in your first language could be equally done in English. So see if you can do that. Invite more English into your routine. I have a channel on YouTube where I talk about that stuff, and I have a video titled How to Integrate More English into Your Routine. And also I have a video that is titled How to Overcome the Intermediate Plateau, where I talk just about that hat that we put on when we're learning English, and we put on that hat when we think of English as a subject, as opposed to a tool that we use to learn about the world and explore reality. And the latter is what we need, not the former. Alrighty. Now here's a question from Amit. If we think so much about food, when will we eat food? But probably that's the difference between food and education. Are you talking about theory and practice, Amit? I'm very much of a theoretical person, as you can tell, so I have to push myself to do practical stuff. However, taking into account that I'm very passionate about the things that I'm passionate about, be it teaching English, working on myself, introspection, developmental psychology, enlightenment, awakening, stuff like that. I'm very passionate about those things, and I really love doing those things practically. So when it comes to meditation, I'd rather do it and see if it works practically, and I'll be truthful about it with myself. So I will do it, I will see if it works, I will question the effectiveness of that activity. I will do that for myself, as opposed to just reading about it as written by an expert or someone else. I think a common mistake that I can observe these days is that people read something that was said by an expert or someone they respect in the industry, and they just repeat the things that that person has said, instead of thinking them through or seeing if those things relate to their own personal experience. Maybe those words have nothing to do with their personal experience, but they make them feel smart and sound smart when they say that. And I feel there is a problem with that, because if we solely rely on the intellectual component of information, as opposed to the feeling or experiential component of that information, we'll lose a great deal. We lose touch with reality. We lose touch with experience. We live in our head. We are dissociated from life. Dissociation is something that is happening in spirituality these days. People explore big transcendental states. They long for transcendental states. They want to be in a state of God's consciousness, whereas they ignore the humanness, which is also a state that the consciousness assumes. And that is very sad. That is very sad. That is lopsided and skewed, and not something that contributes to a whole and complete life experience. So yeah, if there is something that you're truly passionate about, do it and start relying on your own experience. You are your best authority. Your own experience will tell you the best. Will tell you best if what you're doing is right or wrong. Just rely on it. Learn to trust yourself. Learn to question what you are told. It's great that we're teaching questioning in English lessons. I love doing questioning with my younger learners. For instance, when I'm teaching a young learner, I may actually play a recording to them where a person may be expressing their opinion based on something. And then I will ask the learner, do you actually agree with that? Even if that person is presenting themselves, the one in the recording, as an expert, I think there is value in asking the kid to question the expert and see if the kid actually agrees with what the expert is saying. It's fine to show your students that it's okay to question yourself. It's fine to show your students that they can question anything. They can question the effectiveness of any method that you bring into the classroom. Bringing the translation method, ask your students to question it. Ask your students to question marks. And the school that they go to, the language school, for instance, right? The method that is implied, that is implemented in that school, is it a good method? Ask them. What do they think about it? The reason why we're afraid of people questioning things is because we're afraid of being vulnerable. We take things personally, and we think that if people question things, that is threatening to our core sense of self. And people do believe that because it's true for them, right? So they feel pain. We feel pain when we're being questioned because we feel that we're being threatened. But what we actually need to do is create that distance between ourselves and between our being and the things that we do, right? We are not what we do. We are not what we do. We're something different. And once that realization occurs, you no longer feel threatened by feedback because you don't see it as threatening, you see? You don't see it as threatening, right? Because it's not about you. Thank you very much, guys, for very nice feedback that you're leaving in the comments. If you have questions that have to do with teaching, life purpose, the English language, counseling, psychology, spirituality, or how all of that fits together, you can put them into the chat. I'll be very happy to share my view on things. Amit is asking about good books. Yes, there are a few books that I can recommend. There is an amazing paper written by Susan Cook-Greuter on developmental psychology, which is titled just that, Developmental Psychology. You can also check out on a video that I'm going to put into the chat right now. And this video was filmed by a guy who specializes in practical philosophy and helping people create an experience of extraordinary life. And this guy created a series of videos rather, that are specializing in developmental psychology, and they're titled The 9 Stages of Ego Development. I recommend that you watch this series of videos. There's part 1 for you in the chat. If you're interested, you can follow through to his channel and find parts 2 and 3. Very enlightening, very educational. In terms of introspection, he's done a video on it too. It's very advanced. So I know that among teachers, there are very many people who are super advanced in their development. And that is something that I personally love about the teaching industry. I mean, in teaching industry, people are cut out to do development. We push people to do that, and we're very happy to do that on ourselves. So I notice that teachers can do that very well, right? Teachers develop ourselves. We do that very well. You know, that's our forte. And that is something that we can take into our stride. Yeah, Ken Wilber was another scholar that I mentioned. Ken Wilber has a series of books. One that I love most is called Integral Psychology. There we go, Integral Psychology. He talks about different methods of, that's the one for you if you're into psychology. He talks about different levels of human development and how they can be used to figure out which level of development you and I are at. So very, very enlightening. Then Peter Ralston, The Book of Not Knowing, that's a work of art, I mean, to me. A really great book on how to figure out what is true. That's all I can say. So I'm going to leave you with that. Peter Ralston, The Book of Not Knowing. Check it out. That would probably be the first book that I would recommend to anyone who would love to learn more about themselves. Very enlightening. Yeah, so those would be my book recommendations. Ken Wilber has also a fantastic book that is titled Religion of Tomorrow, where he integrates various spiritual methods of development with the current, with the levels of ego development. Very interesting. Just once again, check it out. Thank you, Abu. Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Amin. Thank you, Cruz. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Sardar. Thank you, Mariwan. Thank you, Morad and Rakid. Thank you very much, guys, for being with me. I think I'm going to wrap up this session right now. If you would love to have more of these, please let me know in the comments. Please come and visit my channel. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about many of those matters in greater detail, and my channel is called Intelligent. Ing and then Intelligent. I'd really love to invite you to come and join me in this work, because I feel that teaching English is no longer solely about articles and vocabulary and present perfect continuous and stuff like that. It's getting very holistic, very integral, and if we can actually take this in our stride and learn which activities contribute to our learners' personal growth and development, will be in the forefront, will be in the avant-garde, and our learners will actually benefit from being with us, will have a massive competitive advantage if that's something that you're looking for, by following this work and by learning about this work and by learning to integrate activities from all various spheres of life into your English teaching, and doing that practically, actually figuring that out for yourself and doing that practically. I'm very thankful for your encouragement. I'm going to go now, and I'm very thankful for being with me. Please share this stream, the recording of it, with your colleagues and friends if you feel that is something that would be valuable for them to learn about. And I will talk to you again. Thank you so much. I love you so much, guys. I love you so much.